Johann Sebastian Bach. For me, studying the music of Bach is already a pleasure. It's like putting together a puzzle. It's so amazingly written, and it takes a lot of time to get to understand it. But the process itself, because it's the best music. Mozart is the best in his language. Bach is the best in his language, and it's really a fascinating process. Let's look at the first element maybe to discuss is articulation, that we discussed a little bit from technical aspect. Maybe now it's time to look at it through the glasses of music. The source I would very much recommend you to read is the book by Quantz on playing the flute in English. Also Oteter, who is French. On the chapter of on articulation, he explains how to use the different consonants, syllables. Mainly we use t, d, also like d, and sometimes even softer than that, which is like r, very soft. We have to remember, of course, that at the time, the flute that was used was a different flute. I will not get deeply into that. It needed a little bit different approach, but the ideas, the aesthetics of the Baroque, if we understand them and we make the adjustment right to the modern flute, it works just as well. Sounds a bit different, but works. So let's look at the first movement of the partita and try to understand a little bit how to use the articulation with what Quantz calls jumps and steps. Quantz says that when you have a jump, you can separate more, and when you have a step, that means like a second, which a scale motion, you can play a softer articulation. So actually with T and D and R, you can do everything in terms of articulation, and you actually don't need any slurs. I play a bit and I will try to explain. So the first few notes, these are steps. So I treat the three notes as a group, and then I use a soft T-do-do, 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 one group, and then jumps. So the chord is more separated and the steps are more together. And so on and so on. So mainly with the tongue, of course, with dynamics also. So this would be a main element. If you use this step and jumps with T, do, and ru from Quantz, you have already a lot of the music and the phrasing of Bach solved, so to say. Another element I already mentioned by Mozart, it would be very important to understand by the music of Bach, by the music of his contemporaries, also Baroque and classical. It's the, I would say, hierarchy of the beats in the bar. One is always the most important beat. And then depending, if it's 2-4, then 1 and 2. If it's 4-4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If it's 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So 3 is kind of leading to 1. So if we look, so 1 goes very easy, goes very naturally with the music, but Bach is more complicated than that. Do you know this? Where is the 1? Where is the 2? Maybe you want to open the score. Actually, he wrote, it starts with an upbeat. Why does he do that? Another example. Where is the one? Is it, or is it, look at the score. Bach uses this rule very cleverly, very smart, because he knows that we know that one is important. When he doesn't want to emphasize the one, he puts the beginning of the phrase on a light beat so that he knows that we will know that it's the beginning of the phrase, but it's on a light beat, so we will not emphasize. Then comes the strong beat, but it's an unimportant note of the phrase, so we know that we will not emphasize it. In this way, it gets a nice flow, almost without emphasis, or interesting, no? Okay, let's move on and look on another element. This is the motif, the motive. I would call it Lego. Do you know Lego? When we were kids, when I was a kid, we had this Lego. They have different sizes and they have different colors. And for me, sometimes looking at the music of Bach, looking for motifs, it's like a little game of Lego. I will give you an example. If we look at the saraband from the partita, so the first, let's say the first Lego piece, the first motif, is basically the first bar. When I recognize it and when I analyze it and when I decide how I want to play it, how do I want to play it? 3 steps, jump, jump, step. So I have an idea, and I still remember that one is heavier, then I have this motif. Once I understand this motif, I see it everywhere in the movement. If you look at this, when you twist it, so the jump is in the beginning, then 3 notes, and then 2. Or one, 3, 2. So it all comes from the first motif, variations on the same motif. Once I see this motif and I recognize it, I can see his appearances in different costumes, but when I have the decision how I treat it, then I have kind of a coherence in the whole saraband because he uses the same material, the same motif. So looking after the motives is a very, very nice way, interesting way to look for your interpretation. Another interesting point to mention, not only by Bach, in general, a lot by Bach, a lot by Baroque, but in general, is articulation versus or in comparison with phrasing. I will give you an example by talking. When we talk, when we speak a whole sentence, there is the melody of the sentence. If I say something and you follow my voice, there is some kind of melody. At the same time, there is the diction. I try to speak clearly so you understand what I'm saying. So, I try not to speak like that. I try not to speak like that. You have to combine the music of the sentence with the clarity of the sentence. And the same applies with the music. If I play I try to be as clear as possible, but at the same time, phrase it or play a full phrase. If we want to be more specific or more technical, I would say that the tonguing, the articulation, is on a micro level and the air is the macro level, and they both coexist at the same time. So we have to concentrate on both, be clear and lead the phrase. And this will apply for every music, a lot in the Baroque, but not only. The next point I would like to mention, I would call it perspective, and I tell you what I mean. When we play, for instance, a sonata with figured bass, we have a soprano and bass and chords that are coming out from the bass. And we should, first of all, know very well the bass line. Here is a quiz. And so on and so on. Do you know this music? Do you know this piece? Do you know it's a flute sonata? Maybe you know that. Yeah, it's the same music. Yeah, this is the sopran. What I played before is the bass. And it's very important to know the bass for very many different reasons. First of all, in the music of the Baroque time, the sopran and the bass are equally important. They always have some kind of a dialogue. They treat each other. Sometimes the soprano is in front, sometimes the bass is in front, and they always have some kind of dialogue. And looking from the bass up is a different perspective than looking from the soprano down. And some people think, oh, what we play is the solo and the rest is accompaniment. Okay? So first of all, study the bass. Get to know it. It will give you lots of information on the way you should treat your line as well, in many, many different aspects. One of them that is very interesting and important in the Baroque music is how we treat dissonances. So if we look at that same bar, bass line and soprano, this C sharp is played at the same time that the B in the bass is played. So C sharp against the B is a dissonant that always want to resolve. So what we do, first we play the bass, we get to know it, and then we compare bass, bass, and sopran, sopran and bass. And we want to see where is a dissonant occurring, because basically all of the tonal music that we know is based upon tension and resolution. And the more the tension is exposed, the better the resolution feels. So every tension we should show. Of course, there are different measures of tension, but we have to know it and release. Yeah? So we go. Yeah? And if you don't know yet exactly what dissonants are, it's fine. Just know that in the scale, if we are in E major, E is not a tense note, B is not a tense note, but C sharp is against the harmony, so to say. So it's a dissonant in tense, and then going back. Good. So let me just say that Bach has much, much more to it. But I just pick main notes because I see many, many young players dealing with sort of same problems, and I think those points will help you a lot. It's not all the points. And remember that you're kind of collecting principles that will also help you with other composers and different pieces.